Tonight, we step into something far more terrifying than any plague or medieval dungeon, the strict, suffocating, lipstick-coated rulebook of the 1960s American sorority girl. White gloves and weigh-ins. Curfews enforced by a woman with the hearing of a bat. More unwritten rules than there are pages in the phone book. You were not allowed to use after 10. Forget the glossy yearbook photos and the matching cardigans. Behind every bright smile was a world of relentless surveillance, baffling etiquette, and the constant low-grade dread of being spotted climbing out of a boy's car 1 minute past curfew. Imagine you have just woken up in the autumn of 1963. Your hair is in curlers, your roommate is already crying about a boy, and a bell is about to ring that will decide the entire shape of your day. Welcome to the sisterhood. Try very hard not to get confused. You wake before dawn to a bell. Not a gentle chime, not a clock radio. You can swat into silence, but a real, insistent, building-wide bell that means precisely what it always means. Get up, in-na-na-na-na, in-that, in-na, in-na, in-na. Inan, ga, gri, ga, groom, with 2, maybe 3 other girls in a grand old house that smells of hairspray, floor polish, and somebody is contraband cigarette. They told you this would be the best years of your life. They did not mention the bell. Then there were the sleeping arrangements. In-na-na-na-na, in-that, in-na, in-na, in-na. Inan, iname, inna, ba, in greatly, dressed, for storing your things, for crying about a boy in relative privacy. The actual sleeping happened in a cold dormitory or a screened porch lined with bunks, where the entire pledge class breathed the same frigid night air in unison like a barracks full of debutantes. The theory was that sleeping in the cold was healthy, invigorating, good for the complexion. You were cold, you were exhausted, and you were already behind. Now, the dress code. A 1960s sorority girl was never simply dressed. She was inspected. Skirts measured to the knee, blouses pressed, white gloves for formals, hats for football games. A boy could roll out of bed and into class in the same shirt he slept in. A sorority girl had to look as though she would step out of a magazine ad every single day. And then there was the house mother, that benevolent dictator who lived downstairs and seemed to materialize out of thin air the moment a rule was being bent. She had eyes in the back of her head, ears like sonar, and the mercy of a tax collector. She knew who came in late, who left early, and who had been crying in the second-floor bathroom. Her job was to enforce the unwritten rules. Your job was to never ever find out what happened when you broke them. Curfews were sacred. 7:30 on weeknights in some houses, 10 on weekends in others. You signed in. You signed out. If you were 1 minute late, you were confused, confined to the house for a week, sometimes 2, and the boys across the street, in their fraternity houses, never once had to think about any of this. They had a keg, you had a curfew. Then there were the weigh-ins. Yes, weigh-ins. Once a week, in some houses, every pledge stepped onto a scale in front of an officer who wrote the number down in a book. If you gained a pound, there were conversations. If you gained 3, there were interventions. Your body was not your own. It belonged to the house, and the house had a reputation to maintain. Charm classes came next. How to walk, how to sit, how to introduce your date to your father, how to eat soup without slurping, how to smile when you wanted to scream. There were posture charts on the walls and books on your head during walking drills. The pledge semester was its own special ordeal, memorizing the names of every active member, their hometowns, their majors, their pledge classes, learning the secret handshake, the secret song, the 17 separate rules about exactly how to wear one tiny pin over your heart. You went without sleep. You completed strange tasks. You leaned on your pledge sisters, and they leaned on you. Misery, it turns out, makes excellent glue. And then at the very end, the demands fell away, and the ceremony arrived. The candles, the solemn words, the moment you stopped being a pledge and became at last a full sister. What happened in those final days was sealed behind an oath. A promise of silence that members took with genuine seriousness. Now ask a woman decades later what really went on, and watch her smile, shake her head, and change the subject. The secrecy was not just about hiding embarrassment, it was part of the magic. The sense that you had been admitted to something hidden, something earned, something the outside world would never fully know. But before this, all sounds unbearable. Let us be fair and talk about the payoff, the formals, the homecomings, the dances that lit up the long regulated year. After all the rules and the drudgery, there were genuinely magical nights, ball gowns and corsages, mood lighting and live music, a boy in a borrowed jacket, and a slow dance under paper decorations. These events were the shimmering reward at the center of the whole system. The reason the curfews and the charts felt, in the moment, almost worth it. You planned for weeks. You dressed like royalty. And for a few glittering hours, the surveillance softened and the magic took over. Eventually, graduation comes, and you would think the rules might finally release their grip. Inan. Graduating into the role of alumna with its own expectations about how you would carry yourself. Marry well, raise a family, and represent the house out in the wider world. You were a sister for life, which sounded beautiful and also meant the watching never entirely stopped. But so was the lingering sense that you remained always a reflection of the institution that had shaped you. Remained always a reflection of the institution that had shaped you. You walked out the front door for the last time as a student, took one look back at the house that had ruled your every hour, and discovered the rules had simply changed clothes. And the strangest part is this. Many of these women look back not with bitterness, but with deep affection beneath the absurd rules and the very real cruelties. They found friendship, structure, belonging, and a place that felt, for a few short years, like home. The sisterhood was a contradiction, a cage and a comfort all at once. The same house that weighed a girl's body also wiped her tears. The same sisters who sat in judgment on the standards board also lent her their best dresses and stood up at her wedding. The cat. We reign, with the door closed if you like, and no one keeping a ledger of your comings and goings. Take a quiet moment to be grateful. Grateful for privacy. Grateful for the freedom to be exactly as you are, unpolished and unmeasured, and entirely your own. Because history is not only grand and terrible, sometimes it is white gloves and weigh-ins and 3 feet on the floor. Sleep well. You have earned the quiet.